Welcome to the Financial Caregiving webinar. This is the final webinar in a series discussing approaches to combating elder financial exploitation. This webinar will be recorded and shared with registrants after the session. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few technical aspects of the platform to assist you in today's webinar. On the far left of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. Please send content-related questions to this box that our presenters can answer during the Q&A portion. Next to that box, you'll see the EFPRN, FAQs, and links. There will be answers to common questions as well as important links that you may find to use resources. And finally, on the far right of your screen will be the chat box. Feel free to introduce yourself and the organization that you're with, as well as where you are calling in from. I'd now like to welcome today's moderator, Ben Miller. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Welcome to this fourth and final webinar of the Combating Elder Financial Exploitation webinar series in the spring of 2023. Today's webinar, as Nicole mentioned, is on financial caregiving, and we'll discuss advanced planning for caregiving, long-term services and supports for older adults, and we'll also talk about how carefully choosing a financial caregiver can help prevent elder financial exploitation. This presentation is being made by a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau representative on behalf of the Bureau. It does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice from the Bureau, and any opinions or views stated by the presenters today are our own, and they do not necessarily represent the Bureau's views. Links or references to third-party sites that we include don't necessarily reflect the Bureau's endorsement, and there may be other entities or resources that are not listed that may also serve your needs. Today's webinar and the full series is made possible by the CFPB Office for Older Americans. And the Office for Older Americans regulates the offering and provision of consumer financial products or services under the federal consumer financial laws. And OA, as the Office for Older Americans is sometimes called, also enforces federal consumer financial law fairly and consistently and works to educate and empower consumers to make financial decisions. The office develops initiatives and resources to protect older consumers from financial harm, help older consumers make sound decisions at key moments in their financial lives, and people can learn more at the link on the slide, consumerfinance.gov/older Americans. And we do recommend that you explore that because it's packed with terrific resources, some of which we'll talk about today, but many beyond that. I'm Ben Miller. I'm Senior Director for Community Development at ICF, and it's been my privilege to support the CFPB in helping to organize this series. I'm joined by today's featured presenters, Lisa Schifferle and Naomi Karp. Lisa Schifferle is a Senior Policy Analyst in the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. Lisa leads the Managing Someone Else's Money Financial Caregiving Program, as well as the Money Smart for Older Adults program. And before coming to the CFPB, she worked for 12 years at the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. Lisa also spent 8 years at the Maryland Legal Aid Bureau and as a staff attorney and supervising attorney. We're also joined by Ms. Naomi Karp. Ms. Karp is a consultant on aging, law, and policy. She supports educational, governmental, and nonprofit clients, and is a lawyer and policy expert who has worked on aging issues for over 35 years. Naomi is the co-author of the Thinking Ahead Roadmap, which we'll look at in depth today. And her clients include the U.S. Department of Justice, the AARP, and the National Center on Elder Abuse. And from 2011 to 2019, Ms. Karp was Senior Policy Analyst at the CFPB's Office for Older Americans, and prior to that worked at the American Bar Association and at the AARP. Today's webinar is going to cover these topics: the Thinking Ahead Roadmap, which is a resource for advanced financial care planning. We'll talk about Considering a Financial Caregiver, which is a new resource from the CFPB on caregiving options. And we'll talk about long-term supports and services that are available to older adults. But before we dive into those topics, we wanted to launch a couple of polls to learn more about who's in the virtual room with us. So our first poll is, how would you best describe your organization? Are you from a caregiving organization, law enforcement, adult protective services, area agency on aging, a financial institution? Do you work in prosecution, or other? And if the answer is other, please let us know in chat what other means for your organization. And we have two other questions as well that people have already gotten a head start on. Have you been in any of these roles? Informal caregiver, person operating under a power of attorney, guardian. And finally, are you currently doing presentations on financial caregiving to consumers or caregivers? And you can answer yes, more frequently than quarterly, yes, quarterly, yes, annually, yes, less frequently than that, or no. So thank you for these responses. It's wonderful to see that we have great representation from financial institutions here in the virtual room, as well as adult protective services, area agencies on aging. This is really terrific. And many of you have operated in a number of roles and are involved in making presentations on these topics. So I think today's content will be very useful to you, and we're eager to get started. So with that, I'd love to invite Ms. Naomi Karp to talk to us about the Thinking Ahead Roadmap.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ben. And welcome to everyone. I really appreciate the CFPB inviting me to be part of this series, especially as an alum from the CFPB. So let's launch ahead and talk about the Thinking Ahead Roadmap. Let me tell you a little bit about what I'm going to cover in my presentation. So I'm going to define advanced financial care planning and tell you about why it's important. I'm going to explain the Thinking Ahead Roadmap tool for advanced financial care planning. And I wanted to mention that the slides that I'm using today are mainly from a deck designed for presenters to use and deliver a 1-hour introduction to the Thinking Ahead Roadmap. So the slides give an overview of advanced financial care planning. And so I'm doing kind of a twofer today. By using this deck, I'll both deliver the content that's in the Thinking Ahead Roadmap, and I'll give you kind of a basic train the trainer for those of you who may have an opportunity to share this content with older audiences. And you'll see it's pretty much plug and play. I'm not going to cover all parts of the roadmap today, but I'm going to hit the highlights, which are how to pick someone you trust to be your financial advocate, tips for beginning conversations about future money management, how to give your financial advocate the legal authority to help you, and planning a smooth transition in money management in case you do need some help with your finances in the future. So let's launch right ahead. So what is advanced financial care planning? So the way that I'm using the term is if something unexpected happened to you, having a person you trust who can step in and help manage your bills, investments, income, property, and debts is really important. So advanced financial care planning is to put that process in place, and it will help protect your money from fraud, exploitation, and costly financial mistakes, and just give you the help you need for day-to-day money management. So this is a screenshot from the homepage for the Thinking Ahead Roadmap. It's a very complete website. It's at thinkingaheadroadmap.org. I hope that all of you will have an opportunity to take a look at it. As I said, there are a lot more resources there than I will have time to go into today. So it's a website, and it's a series of free print resources designed by researchers, including me, to help adults plan ahead. The Thinking Ahead Roadmap was developed over the last several years by Marty DeLima, a gerontologist, Steve Vernon, who is a financial writer and actuary, and by me, based on my years of experience in law, aging, and policy development. And it's very much grounded in research including interviews with a variety of professionals, multiple focus groups, and an online community forum for a 2-week period with 120 older adults. It walks you through the key stages of advanced financial care planning in 6 straightforward steps, and we're going to hit some of the highlights of those today. So, why might people need help with financial decisions as they age? I'm sure a lot of you know this, certain life and health events that are more common as we age might require some assistance with finances, and these include physical health issues like stroke, surgery, or illness that requires extensive recovery or limits mobility, vision, or hearing ability, and then especially cognitive issues such as Alzheimer's or any other type of dementia. And even in some situations, loss of a spouse or a partner who was the person who handled the finances, leaving someone who, through bereavement or just inexperience, can't manage their money on their own. So these are just a couple of facts that kind of undergird the fact that a lot of people really do or will need help with managing their finances. So, for example, 1 in 5 people aged 75 to 79 have mild cognitive impairment or dementia, and that number goes up to 1 in 3 after age 80. And also, money management abilities are generally the first type of ability or the first realm of decision-making that is affected when someone has mild cognitive impairment or is developing dementia. So money management is really the first to go and the first area where people will need help. So in designing the Thinking Ahead Roadmap training, which again you can find on the website under the presenters column, we wanted to make it as interactive as possible. So I'm including here in my slides some exercises that we do. And in this exercise, we would start out pairing 2 people and having them spend a few minutes discussing a personal experience where someone didn't do advanced financial planning and it might have had negative outcomes. For example, someone might have had cognitive decline and then had financial losses because they made mistakes or they were ripped off, or the family members ended up having to get guardianship, which is not something that you would voluntarily want to go through if possible. So we would have people talk about that and then come back into the group. So advanced financial care planning can reduce those risks by reducing opportunities for fraud and exploitation, reducing the chance of poor financial decisions, and this is an important one, easing the burden on future financial decision makers by giving them instructions, figuring out how you want your money management and where your money is so people know that when they have to take over. And, by doing that, increasing the chance that your money will be managed in the way that you want and that your wishes and expectations will be honored. So in our research, we found we talked to, as I said, over 120 older adults, and we asked them why they thought advanced financial care planning was important. And this is the breakdown that we found. More than a third said it would give them peace of mind. Another quarter said they wanted to avoid being a burden. So they wanted to put things in place for their family members or others. Also maintain financial autonomy. That's really important. In a situation where you might feel you're losing control, doing advanced planning and having it done the way you want actually enables you to maintain control, and also improving family harmony. So, what are those 6 steps that I mentioned based on our research? So let me just say what they are. We're not going to go into all of them. So the first one is really key. It's selecting a trusted financial advocate, figuring out who that person is, then getting your finances in order, starting an open conversation with that person. And we wrote the roadmap from the point of view of the aging person, rather than their adult children or other family members. So how they can start a conversation with someone who they want to have be their financial advocate, sharing their values, what matters most to them about their money needs, making the arrangement official by getting a power of attorney, and then finally planning on how you will actually transition if that transition becomes necessary. So picking your financial advocate, that's a big one. So what is a financial advocate? Well, a financial advocate, that term, it's not a legal term. It's not a technical term. It's a term that we came up with after talking to a lot of older people and a lot of professionals. This is a term that encapsulates a positive idea of someone who can step in your shoes and help you when you need help. It's that person you would trust to assist you with money management tasks if you couldn't handle them on your own. So there are lots of tasks. We list them on this slide here. Just anything that you do to manage your own money, from paying your bills, monitoring your accounts online, paying back money that you owe, if you have any property, managing it. It can include things like applying for public benefits and making charitable donations, but long list goes on and on. So then if we were doing one of these trainings, we might have a group discussion on what qualities should you look for in a financial advocate. And we list some of them. Some of them are pretty obvious. You really want someone who's trustworthy, who's honest, who's organized, who's available. And available doesn't necessarily have to mean lives around the corner or in town. The person could be remote, but very well connected and on top of things, especially now with so much available online. A good communicator, a good listener, puts your needs first, and financially savvy. So then we would brainstorm on what are some qualities or characteristics that you might want to avoid in a financial advocate. And again, some of these are obvious, but it's still worth stating them. You don't want someone who's not good at managing their own money, doesn't pay their bills on time, is facing their own personal, legal, or financial problems, has perhaps an addiction issue, likes to gamble, or just doesn't get along with the people who they're going to have to deal with if they're stepping into your shoes. So then we have a myth. So one myth is, I don't need a financial advocate because my spouse or partner will manage our money if anything happens to me. Well, that may well be true, and it's fine to have your spouse or your partner be your primary financial advocate, because they'll know your money, they'll share a lot of your money matters, and but it's really important to have another person as a backup, because the reality is that at some point, one person will get sick or will outlive the other. So we always say, if possible, have a financial advocate or a backup who is younger or healthier or who is likely to be around for a while to the point when you actually need them. So then we would be moving participants along to thinking about, now let's get specific. Who are you considering having be your financial advocate? And why would you want to pick this person? And we would have we would do another pair and share activity, or it could be a discussion about what makes them right for the role. And then I did want to highlight one kind of subgroup of the population, people who are aging solo. And you might find, if you were doing a workshop, that some people would say, well, I don't have adult children, I don't have a spouse, don't live near any of my family, I'm not on good terms with them, whatever, and I'm really stymied as to who can be my financial advocate. Well, when we talked to these solo agers, when we were doing our research, we asked them, if you have picked someone who you want to have step in for you and manage your money, who have you picked? And they said things like a sibling, sometimes a personal attorney to be perhaps a backup, a niece or a nephew, someone in their religious community, just, someone else who's not necessarily what we think of typically the adult child, because many people don't have them. Now, what to do if you're still stumped? It is possible to hire professionals who can manage daily finances, often for a fee. And these might be people like trust officers, geriatric care managers, accountants, or daily money managers. Again, if we're talking about lower income people, that can be problematic. There are some daily money management programs that are available for lower income people. So important to look in your community and see who can step in and help out solo agers, because they need this advanced financial care planning as much as anyone else. So let's move on to the next step in the Thinking Ahead roadmap: get your finances in order. And here we talk about creating a financial inventory, and this doesn't have to be something really formal. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be something an accountant can do. It's just a document where you really pull together, where's my money? How much money do I have? What are my account numbers? What are my regular bills? And your usernames and passwords to your financial accounts. Just a place that you pull together all of that important information so that when your financial advocate needs to step in, they have it pulled together in one place. And obviously, it's important to keep updating this. It's also important to store it in a safe place. So you could have a hard copy document that you put in a locked drawer or a safe. It could be online with a secure password, and you'll have to make arrangements for how your advocate gets access to that when the time comes. And it's not always necessary to share this immediately. We encourage people to do advanced financial care planning at any age and any stage, but particularly when people are approaching or in retirement, they may be years or decades away from the point that they might need help, and they don't necessarily have to share all of this information. But it's just good to have it together so that when you're approaching that point when you need it, it's there. So now starting an open conversation, and many people think this is the hardest part. And actually, when we started the Thinking Ahead Roadmap project, our original goal was to create what we called a conversation guide to help people know how these conversations. Then we realized we need a lot more than just a conversation guide. So we came up with the full roadmap. But how to start an open conversation, talking about both money and the fact that you may have some limitations in the future. Those things are both really hard to do. And sometimes people need some help just figuring out how to get that conversation going. Obviously, the conversation's important. So you could communicate to someone that you would like them to be your financial advocate. You can convey to them your financial needs and your goals, answer any questions they might have, and again, make it more likely that they will handle things for you the way that you want them to be handled. So here we have some conversation starters that you might try, and these are based on interviews that we did, and these are some of the tacks that people took. And sometimes it's storytelling, remember how terrible it was when such and such happened to Aunt so-and-so. I don't want anything like that to happen with me, so I'm trying to plan in advance. Or it could be an observation like, I really like the way you are handling your money, and I like your work ethic, and I really trust you. I'm thinking about my future, and that's why I'd like to ask you if you're willing to step in and help me. And if you do have an adult child and it's kind of clear that that's the person who would help you, it's still important to have that conversation. Honey, I trust you, but this is something you may need to do in the future. So lots of different ways to approach the conversation. So as we kind of mentioned in the first conversation, you can't do everything. So the first one is mostly about sort of setting up the situation, answering questions, and making sure that person is up to the task and willing to do it. And we recognize that it's important for that person, the advocate, to understand what's involved in taking on the responsibility. So we have pulled together a handout that's on the Thinking Ahead Roadmap website called What You Need to Know as a Financial Advocate. And this draws from things like the CFPB's Managing Someone Else's Money Guides, which I think Lisa will probably mention a little bit later. Just so from that person's point of view, what are the things I need to know about managing someone else's money? And you can really make their job easier by giving them those kind of talking and thinking points. So the next stage we call make it official. So what is making it official? Making it official is giving your advocate legal authority to step into your shoes and act on your behalf. And typically, you would do this by naming them in a power of attorney document, although there might be exceptions where if you have complex and large finances, it could be a trust. But typically, we're talking about a power of attorney. Why do you need to take this step? Why can't it be just an informal arrangement? Well, here are a few key reasons. Without legal authority, your advocate won't be empowered to do all of those things that we talked about that you'll need: paying bills, withdrawing money from accounts, managing property, and making financial decisions. And specifically, financial services providers like banks, brokers, retirement fund managers, and even government entities that might be paying benefits to you will want to make sure that your advocate has the legal power to act for you, and will need to see that document. And finally, I mentioned before guardianship. If you don't give your advocate authority in advance and something happens and no provisions have been made, a family member, friend, or someone else might have to go to court to get a guardian appointed. This is a public proceeding, typically. It can be expensive, it can take time, and you don't necessarily get to pick the person who you want to manage your money. So again, making it official with a power of attorney is one more way to ensure that you stay in control. You're calling the shots in advance. So what is a financial power of attorney? It's a legal document that gives someone else the legal right to make decisions about your money and property. And technically, you, the person who makes the document, are called the principal, and your financial advocate is called your agent. You can also name an alternate to take over if the primary agent becomes unavailable. How do you get a power of attorney? People often think, oh, I can't do that because I have to go to a lawyer. It's very expensive. I can't afford that. We do recommend typically that you hire a lawyer because the power of attorney needs to be done properly. Every state has its own requirements, and you also want to make sure that the power of attorney is tailored to your needs and the needs that you will have in the future. It's not necessarily going to be that expensive, so we recommend people call around and see what people charge and what their specialties are. And many older people may qualify for free legal services. So that may be another way to get legal help. Employers may provide low-cost legal services because typically making a power of attorney is a very simple process. Obviously, now there are online services that might be free or low cost, but we really do want to tell people to beware of a one-size-fits-all form because, again, there are nuances here and there are state law differences. So beware of just printing a form off the internet and sign it. There's also witnessing requirements, so you need to make sure you dot the I's and cross the T's. So finally, plan a smooth transition. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. You can put all this in place, but you still may feel, and you should feel, vitally independent and not ready to turn anything over to someone else, nor should you if you're totally able to manage your finances. But we do recommend that people think about what that transition might look like and when a transition might be important. And in developing the roadmap, we kind of put things into two categories. Blazing red emergency signals, which might mean that it's time right now to get your financial advocate involved, and yellow caution light signals, which mean you may be getting close to the time or needing a little help, but not help with everything. So it may be time to start a gradual transition if you haven't started that already. It's also common that a person might be unaware that they're experiencing some of these signals, or they might be susceptible to wishful thinking that everything's okay. Or they might just not want to worry their adult children or other relatives. So to guard against those situations, you might want to develop your own early warning signals that could apply to your circumstances. And then you could ask close family and friends to tell you if they see you experiencing these. If you commit in advance to receiving help when these signals happen, maybe you will be less resistant when the time comes. After all, you understood that it was important to plan ahead. And so you understand that it's important to get help at a certain point if you need it. So we would typically do some brainstorming about what are some early caution signals that suggest it's time for the yellow light, the gradual transition. And some of those are things like, you're needing caregivers, you maybe are neglecting some common tasks, you occasionally forget to pay a few bills, and you're starting to have trouble doing business on the computer or on the phone. Those are kind of in the yellow category. What would a smooth gradual transition look like? Well, again, simplifying your finances, agreeing on that early warning system, making sure that you've shared that financial inventory with your advocate, perhaps meeting annually with your advocate to go over the finances and any changes, and beginning sharing some financial tasks. You might, go over your statements with the person and get them more familiar with things. So what are some signs that a more urgent transition is needed? Well, these are things like receiving a diagnosis of dementia or some other serious medical condition that's going to interfere with your ability to independently manage your finances. A professional such as a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant expresses some concern. You've made some serious financial mistakes, forgetting to file taxes, forgetting to pay your insurance premiums, things like that. You're getting lost, all of those things that indicate some cognitive decline. Or it could be, getting scammed or getting financially exploited, new friends appearing and getting access to your account. Those are all things where we better get somebody else involved now. So just to wrap up about the Thinking Ahead roadmap, we have talked about why it's important to plan and to select a financial advocate, and the way we've envisioned the journey and the steps along the roadmap. So again, we encourage you and anyone who you share this information with to take a look at the thinkingaheadroadmap.org. We've tried to make everything in plain language and very organized and accessible. Everything on the website is downloadable and printable, so it's free. Handouts are available for both the person who's doing the planning and for the advocate. And again, it's important to revisit your advanced financial care plan and who you've chosen as your advocate whenever you have major life changes, or periodically even without that. Perhaps something big happens in the life of the person you've chosen as advocate and they're no longer appropriate, or they get sick or they pass away. So it's not written in stone, needs to be revisited in order to keep it as a living and viable plan. So thank you for your interest in the roadmap. We hope that you'll share it. We worked hard to create it, and it's gotten a lot of positive feedback, but people need to know about it and use it. So we hope you'll use it and that you will share it with older adults in your community. And thank you so much. So now I'm going to turn things over to Lisa Schifferly to talk about some CFPB initiatives and resources.
Thanks so much, Naomi, and thanks for sharing the Thinking Ahead roadmap. My name is Lisa Schifferly, and I'm a senior policy analyst in the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. Like Naomi said, I'm going to share some CFPB tools to help with financial caregiving, or as Naomi called it, financial advocacy, or a financial advocate, and financial planning as we age. These are really great complements to the Thinking Ahead roadmap. I'm going to talk about the CFPB's managing someone else's money resources, focusing on a relatively new piece called Considering a Financial Caregiver, Know Your Options, which has information about informal and formal caregivers, as well as some more tips on how to pick the right person. Then in the second half of my presentation, I'm going to share some information about financial decision-making related to long-term supports and services. So let's start with the Considering a Financial Caregiver piece. This is a short bifold publication, and it's designed for people early in the caregiving process. Maybe you're just starting to notice that a loved one needs help with managing their finances, or maybe you're planning ahead yourself for your own financial future. Either way, knowing the options available will help you choose what works best for the situation. So like I said, this covers informal and formal caregiving options, as well as how to choose a caregiver, and we'll go through each of those in turn. You can find this at consumerfinance.gov/MSEM, like managing someone else's money. So when we talk about informal caregivers, and I saw from the poll that a lot of you already are informal caregivers, so maybe some of you are in these positions already. But what we're talking about are conversation partners, trusted contact persons, or convenience accounts. There are other arrangements as well, but basically an informal caregiver is just someone who helps out on an as-needed basis. So when we talk about a conversation partner, this is just a term that we use to describe when you talk to a trusted relative, friend, or professional and give them an overview of your finances. As Naomi said, before you share anything, it's really important to choose the right person, but you do want to start these conversations early and start planning ahead. So you may want to talk to somebody who is a trusted friend or relative, and perhaps take them with you even when you visit your banker or financial advisor, or send them a copy of your statement so they can get familiar with your finances, or start showing them or letting them know about your inventory of assets and finances so they can help out later when you do need help. Another type of informal caregiver is what's called a trusted contact person. And this is available on all brokerage or investment accounts, and also other financial institutions might offer it as well. Basically, what it does is it allows a financial institution to contact the trusted contact if they see signs of fraud or financial exploitation. So if I name my brother as my trusted contact person and I suddenly started wiring large sums of money overseas, then he would get a contact call from, or some other, or maybe an email, but the financial institution would reach out to him and say, you are Lisa's trusted contact person, and this is not like her, so you should be in touch with her and see what's going on. The thing to know about trusted contacts is they do not have access to your money. They can't make withdrawals or do other transactions. This often helps people feel more comfortable with it. If they don't want to give up control, they are not giving up control. They're just naming someone who can be notified in the case of fraud or exploitation. Sometimes this will be called an emergency contact, but more formally, it's called a trusted contact. Another type of informal caregiving arrangement that I want to talk about is what's called a convenience account. And this can allow you to name someone to help you deposit or withdraw money and write checks. So these are kind of increasingly helpful tools in terms of informal caregiving. At first, you might just have the conversation. Then if you need a little more help, you might put down a trusted contact. In fact, we recommend that everyone put trusted contacts on their account, regardless of whether you need help now, because you don't know when in the future you might need that help. It's a good tool for everyone. But then the convenience account is when you start needing a little more help with depositing or withdrawing money or checks. And we just want to distinguish this from a joint account where money is jointly owned and the joint account holder automatically gets the money when you die. Oftentimes people have joint accounts and are familiar with that. So they may just jump to that when they're trying to help with managing finances. However, that can have unintended consequences. Because with a joint account, if one of the account holders goes into debt, then the creditors can come after the money in the account. Also, with a joint account, if one of the account holders passes away, then the other one gets all the money. So, for example, say my mother set up a joint account with me so I could help her manage her finances. If she were to pass away, all the money would go to me, which is probably not her intention. She'd probably want it divided between me and my brother. Also, if I got in debt, they could come after her money for my debt. So that's why we recommend a convenience account rather than a joint account. That's all what happens with a joint account. With a convenience account, by contrast, it does not change the ownership of the money in the account or give the right of your helper to keep the money when you die. So the money belongs only to you, and the helper just gets to help with writing checks and withdrawals. So those are the three informal caregiving options I want to discuss. And this slide lists 4 formal caregiving options that I'll go through in turn. Naomi talked about power of attorney and guardian. I'll talk about those briefly as well as trustee and government fiduciary. And we actually have entire guides on each of those in our Managing Someone Else's Money series that I'll show you in a minute. But another aspect of our considering a financial caregiver piece is figuring out who is that financial caregiver. And it goes over a list of questions, a lot of which Naomi discussed in the Thinking Ahead roadmap provides as well. But you need to think about if it's someone you trust, you can talk to, who'll make decisions in their best interest, whether they have things like gambling or other addictions that might affect their ability to manage your money properly, and whether they'll keep good records. So let's look at the formal caregiving options. Like I mentioned before, we do have guides for each of these formal caregiving arrangements, and these are designed for just regular people who are taking on these roles. You can find them at consumerfinance.gov/MSCM. And many thanks to Naomi, who helped create them when she was at CFPB with the help of the American Bar Association. Basically, these guides help financial caregivers understand their duties. They have tips for fiduciaries. They have information on identifying benefits. They describe warning signs of financial exploitation and provide other helpful information for anyone who's taking on these roles. So one of the roles that we want to highlight is power of attorney. Naomi talked about this. This is one of the most common roles. It's created by a legal document where someone known as the principal gives someone else known as the agent legal authority to make decisions about their money or property. People are sometimes reluctant to do this because they're worried about giving up control. But really, as Naomi said, power of attorneys do actually give you control because you get to name the person who you want to manage your finances, as opposed to a court or someone else naming it if something unexpected happens. So one thing I do want to point out is that there is a healthcare power of attorney, which is different from the financial power of attorney. Sometimes people don't realize that, but a healthcare power of attorney allows you to make healthcare decisions, whereas the financial one allows you to make financial decisions. We actually had this come up in my family where someone was in the hospital and we pulled out the power of attorney and realized that it only covered healthcare decisions and not financial decisions. So it's a pretty common misunderstanding. Another type of formal fiduciary is a government fiduciary. It can be a representative payee if the person is managing someone's Social Security benefits. It's called a VA fiduciary if they're managing someone's Veterans Affairs benefits. The main thing to know about these is that the government benefits representative payee or VA fiduciary, the fiduciary in this situation only has control over the government benefits checks. And they only get that control if the government agency makes that appointment. So on the flip side, even if you're agent under power of attorney or guardian, you don't necessarily have legal authority to manage the federal benefits checks. So it's really important to understand that for this type of fiduciary, it's made by the government agency and only covers the government benefits. Now, what's a guardian of property? Naomi mentioned this as well. This is when a court steps in to name someone to manage money or property, oftentimes if you don't have a power of attorney. And I'll share another family story to give you an idea of how this could come up. Unfortunately, my grandmother many years ago was driving and was hit by a truck and was in a coma for weeks. And she did not have a power of attorney in place. She was in good health and wasn't expecting this to happen. So we had to go get guardianship while she was in coma, while she was in the hospital, so that my uncle could help manage her finances. And while it was fortunate that we did get it and it worked out okay, it was a very cumbersome process. Like Naomi said, you had to get several doctors come to the hospital and observe her and say that, no, she can't do anything with her finances. And it was a lot more difficult and I imagine costly than if she had had a power of attorney in place. So that's just a story to show why these power of attorney documents are very helpful. So the last type of financial caregiver and formal financial caregiver I want to talk about is what's called a trustee. And here we're talking about revocable living trusts, which are made through a legal document. The main thing to know about the trust is that they specify who gets the money or property in the trust and who manages it and who gets it after that person passes away. So if you have certain property you want to divide up and say maybe your granddaughter gets the car in trust and your other granddaughter gets $10,000 in trust, you can do it that way so that they just manage that chunk of property that's in the trust and then they also get it after you pass away. So that's another financial caregiving option to think about depending on your circumstances. So that covers what is in considering a financial caregiver. Know your options. And again, that's available for free that you can order along with all the managing someone else's money guides at consumerfinance.gov/MSEM. I also want to tell you about this Planning for Diminished Capacity and Illness publication, which is a publication that we created jointly with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And basically, it's advice on planning for your financial future, getting your documents in order, and watching out for financial exploitation. It's been recently updated to include trusted contacts and things like Social Security advanced designation, which allows you to decide in advance to name up to 3 people to become your Social Security representative payee should you need it. So this is just another great tool to check out, in addition to considering a financial caregiver, and in addition to the Thinking Ahead roadmap. So hopefully with all these tools, you will be armed to make better financial decisions for yourself and your loved ones. Before we get to your questions, I do want to turn to the long-term supports and services portion of the presentation, because in anyone's caregiving journey, there may come a time when you or a loved one needs long-term services and support. So let's take a look at what that means and what some of the options are, and a little bit about how they might be financed. So when we're talking about long-term services and supports, or it's sometimes called LTSS, we're basically talking about assistance with medical and personal care services. It can include basic physical activities like eating, toileting, walking, bathing, or more advanced household management activities like grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, managing healthcare, and managing money. So this slide shows some of the options where older adults can get long-term supports and services. I'm going to talk a little bit about each, but of course, people can get supports and services in their own home. They can get it in dedicated communities like HUD-assisted housing, assisted living, continuing care communities, or nursing homes. So let's talk about each of those options a little bit, because again, like with financial caregiving, knowing your options allows you to choose what's best for you and your loved ones. So home-based care is something that is increasingly popular, especially after the pandemic. Many people are choosing to age in place. And during the pandemic, people were trying to avoid nursing homes often because of the increase in COVID there. So there's been a trend towards more aging in place, getting care in the homes. But there are some financial considerations there. First, there's the cost. While any single service may cost less than a nursing home, a lot of people who need help at home are going to need multiple services. So they may need homemaker services at $60,000 a year, plus a home health aide at $62,000 a year. So depending on the combination of services needed, it may add up to more than assisted living or nursing homes. There's also the coverage issue, insurance coverage issue, and states play a large role in determining whether and which home and community-based services will be covered by Medicaid. So coverage for home-based care can often take months. In fact, while I was a legal aid attorney, we had a client who sadly passed away while waiting for his Medicaid home-based services to be approved. So that just unfortunately shows you how long it can take and how difficult it can be to get that coverage. But home-based services are an option for people who have the money or who can qualify for that Medicaid home and community-based services waiver. Another option is HUD subsidized supportive housing. This is only available to certain people with disabilities, as well as low-income older adults. Usually it's if income is less than 50% of the area median income and they're over age 62. So there's a challenge right now. One main challenge is the lack of supply of such housing. According to a 2006 study, about 90% of these types of properties had waiting lists and many were closed to new applicants. Plus, over the next decade or so, we expect demographic shifts to result in older adult homeless population increasing significantly, in fact, nearly tripling by 2030. So the need for this is increasing and the supply remains low. Now let's talk a little bit about assisted living. This is another option for people needing long-term supports and services. And what assisted living does, for those who aren't familiar with it, is it provides assistance with activities of daily living like bathing, dressing, feeding, homemaking, but it does not provide skilled nursing or medical care the way a nursing home does. So one of the challenges with this is because it is room and board and assistance with activities of daily living, it's usually not considered healthcare. So Medicare and Medicaid are not going to cover those costs for the most part. So this can become quite costly, including an entrance fee and a monthly rate at times. Another challenge is the lack of regulation of assisted living facilities. In many states, an individual can open an unlicensed assisted living facility in their own home. To give you an idea, a recent case in South Carolina shows the limitations of the current regulatory scheme. State authorities there recently shut down 4 community residential facilities for posing an immediate threat to health, safety, and welfare of residents. In fact, they found no staff members present for extended periods of time, a padlocked kitchen restricting residents' food supply, and problems with medication storage and distribution, as well as problems with keeping the temperature at the right setting in that assisted living facility. So assisted living, while helpful if you get a good one, also has its challenges. Another type of long-term supports and services option are what's called CCRCs, or continuing care retirement communities. These are facilities that have independent living, assisted living, and nursing home care all in one place. So you can move from one to the other as your needs change over time. They can be particularly good for spouses or partners who need different levels of care but want to be in the same community. One of the challenges with these is, again, the costs. They're often not accessible to low-income people because you have to pay a deposit, like a down payment on a home usually, plus a monthly fee, which can vary depending on the level of care. Also, oftentimes people don't understand how the deposits work and when and how you get them back if you are no longer in the property. The last type of long-term supports and services I want to talk about is nursing home care. This is typically the highest level of care, so no surprise, they're the most expensive too. And Medicare only covers what's called post-acute care in very specific circumstances. So you usually have to move into skilled nursing care from a 3-night hospital stay. And then Medicare only covers rehab for short-term, not long-term care. So this is often a misconception of people thinking that Medicare will just cover nursing homes as long as they need to be there. Now, some people can rely on Medicaid, and in fact, 62% of residents do rely on Medicaid, according to one study. But to rely on Medicaid, you usually have to impoverish yourself to become Medicaid eligible, unless you already are impoverished, in which case you can be Medicaid eligible already. But it also can be hard to show eligibility for institutional Medicaid, even if you are low income and are getting standard Medicaid, you then have to apply for institutional Medicaid. So one other challenge to think about is that many nursing home companies serve as representative payee for residents' Social Security, disability, or VA benefits, and that can sometimes lead to conflict of interest over money. I do want to talk about one issue that the CFPB has been looking at in terms of consumer protection issue in the nursing home space, and that relates to the Nursing Home Reform Act. The Nursing Home Reform Act basically says that a third party, like a family member or friend, cannot be asked to pay out of their own pocket for the cost of the resident's care. So this is an issue where we've heard, unfortunately, where nursing homes are coming after loved ones, or perhaps it could even be a friend of a friend who happens to be the person who takes the person in to get the nursing home care and signs the paperwork. And then nursing homes are coming after them in violation of the Nursing Home Reform Act. So this slide shows some actions that the CFPB has taken with regards to that. Director Chopra had made statements. We have an issue spotlight. We issued a joint letter with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services about this issue, reminding nursing homes that and debt collectors of their responsibilities under the Nursing Home Reform Act and that it is a violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act if they try to come after these funds. So this slide shows a variety of different resources we have on this issue in case you or someone you know are confronted with it. And so we hope that all these resources that we've shared with you today will be helpful to you and your loved ones as you plan your financial caregiving needs, whether it's informal caregiving, formal caregiving, or long-term supports and services. And with that, Naomi and I are here and available to take your questions and try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, Naomi, for 2 wonderful presentations, just packed with important information. So we'll go on camera, and thank you, participants. We already have a number of great questions for our presenters today. First question to start out with was related to how these are weighty, emotional conversations about caregiving. And that's true for the older American and also for the older adult, and also for the person who wants to start a conversation about an older adult that is in their life. What are some thoughts on how to start these conversations from the caregiver's perspective or the prospective caregiver's perspective or from the older adult's perspective? Lisa, do you want to start? Any thoughts on that question?
Sure. I'll talk about it from the caregiver's perspective. And then it sounded like Naomi's thinking ahead does it more from the older adult's perspective. But the challenge is the same, is that people are often hesitant to talk about finances, especially with loved ones, and people are often hesitant to give up control. So it's how do you start difficult conversations? One way that you can do it is to share information, like order at the Managing Someone Else's Money guides, which are all free and in the public domain. You can get as many as you want for free and share them with a loved one or share them in your community to start a conversation, or even just say, I just attended this webinar and it raised some interesting things and I'd love to talk to you about them. Also, you can lead the discussion from a point of respect, like Naomi was saying something like, oh, I've always admired how you manage your finances. Can we talk about it some more? And that can be sort of a door to open the discussion.
Great. Thank you. Naomi, thoughts to add? Oh, Naomi, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sure, I'll take it the other way around, which I started addressing earlier. I think people often have the idea that it's just the older adult who's going to be reluctant to deal with situations, deal with their aging, and might become incapacitated, and that it rests on the younger person. But honestly, it can happen either way. So sometimes the older adult is, facing up to the fact that they're getting older or starting to have limitations, their own parent, and they don't want to repeat that themselves, might be the one to bring it up. And the younger person may be more denial, like, oh, mom, you're fine. That's not going to happen to you or whatever. So it is important to think about how to do it from the other side. And I think some of the examples I gave before, I'd probably just, quickly mention again, using a story of something that happened to someone else, either a bad story, like, hey, but what happened to so-and-so, grandma was in the hospital in a coma and we had to go to court and guardianship, we don't want that to happen again. Or it could even be a good story, like, hey, my parent made it really easy for me by, when they went to their lawyer to do their will, they also made a power of attorney and gave authority, and they shared information with me. And that made it so much easier for me to help them. And I want to make it easier for you to help me if the time comes. So I think often stories are just very effective and less abstract. They make it a lot more concrete. Lisa, I thought your presentation was really strengthened by those personal examples, and I typically think that that's helpful. So that's one good way to go.
Thank you both. Another person asked, how can a financial institution encourage its customers to do advanced planning? We've got a bunch of banks and credit unions on the line today. Naomi, thoughts from you first on how financial institutions can help their customers do advanced planning?
Sure. I think many financial institutions, like, this is kind of my daily work, trying to deal with the person's account and account management, or broker dealer, deal with their, securities. But honestly, I think financial pretty vested interest in having people do advanced financial care planning, because it, ensures that if their customer is incapacitated, there will be another person who's authorized to deal with the bank or the brokerage. And also, if there is another involved financial caregiver or advocate or agent under power of attorney or whatever role they're in, they might help protect the person from getting scammed or defrauded. And then the bank won't have to deal with those situations. So I think financial institutions should be motivated. Larger banks have websites where they have a lot of customer-facing information, and they could deal with advanced financial caregiving as part of that information, not just, what are the kinds of accounts that we have and what is the scam du jour. They can all talk about the importance of advanced financial care planning. They could link to free resources like the Thinking Ahead Roadmap and the CFPB's Managing Someone Else's Money Guides and so forth. So there are a lot of resources out there to make it easier for them. Also, both, community banks and credit unions, as well as some of the larger banks that are present around the country, have people in the communities, either in the branches or elsewhere in the community, who go out and do public education programs for older adults. And I know I've talked to some of these large financial institutions, and they're really hungry for topics for those presentations that aren't marketing, they're just, public education. So this, again, is a great topic for them. So I think there are lots of ways that financial institutions can do that. And then also, if the financial institution does have the option of trusted contact, which I would encourage financial institutions to do, even on the bank side where it's not mandated, that's a time, when someone's opening an account and you're asking them if they want to give a trusted contact, that could be a good segue to mention, oh, and here's some brochures we have on advanced financial care planning, or, think about whether you want that trusted contact to have more authority and that sort of thing. And it doesn't have to be legal advice. It can be general advice, so they don't have to necessarily be worrying about straying into the legal advice area, which they definitely don't want to do.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Lisa, I wanted to ask a question that you may best be positioned to field because it relates to your presentation. Which has more power, a trusteeship or a guardianship? Or
it depends. It's going to depend on the terms of the trusteeship or guardianship. I mean, each of them can grant a wide array of power. You could have a trust that just had, say, your car. You could have a trust that had everything. You could have a guardian of property that's limited to only certain functions, or that's pretty global. So it's going to depend on the terms of the agreement, and people should look at that agreement in terms of the scope of authority.
Great, thank you. And
can I add just one thing to that?
Please.
I was just going to mention that although guardianships can be limited and tailored to a specific situation in practice, typically judges do make very broad orders. And so if someone petitioned for a guardianship of property, or in some places it's called a conservatorship, typically a judge would give that person authority about all money matters and all property matters. So that might be somewhere like, I'm completely agreeing with Lisa's answer, but I'm just saying that if it does go to court and get into a guardianship or a conservatorship, unfortunately, we'd like to see them being tailored to what the person actually needs, but often they are pretty broad.
Thank you.
Also, someone mentioned in the box something about why courts often don't recognize powers of attorney and other, advanced planning things, and they order guardianships. And that is a sad fact. I just wanted to mention almost all states have guardianship laws saying that all less restrictive options should be considered before a guardianship. But in actual fact, that doesn't happen very often, or the court just feels more comfortable with their own authority, and so they might override those things. And that's really unfortunate because we're trying to do the less restrictive options to avoid guardianship, but people should still do their advanced planning, and it should be a hedge against guardianship.
Thank you very much for getting some people seconding your points in the chat. Much appreciated. Well, I regret that we can't get to all of our questions today because we have quite a bit of good ones. But I did have one item to ask. And Lisa, I know part of your professional background is working at legal aid. And one person asked, is there a list of free state agencies that people can turn to for powers of attorney? Legal aid may be a solution for some people. And I'll paste into chat a directory of legal aids. Lisa, would you mind just in a sentence or two sketching what does legal aid do?
Sure. And Naomi's actually a former legal services attorney as well, I believe, as are many of us in the Office for Older Americans. But legal aid provides free legal services to low-income clients in civil cases. So it can be on a variety of different issues, from housing to consumer bankruptcy issues. So people could look to see if they qualify for legal aid. And oftentimes, legal aid has special grants for serving older adults where the income restrictions are not as stringent. So people may qualify as an older adult for legal aid services when they might not if they were younger. So I would check and see if you do qualify. And also, in addition to legal aid, another great resource is the Elder Care Locator at eldercare.acl.gov to find other resources in your area.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for wonderful presentations. We're getting some comments in the chat that people are really appreciating the information you shared today. Along with strong financial caregiving, elder fraud prevention and response networks are a strong way to combat elder financial exploitation. These networks bring together partners across different organizations and sectors to strengthen elder financial justice. We wanted to highlight some resources for finding or building your own network. You can find a network or other elder financial justice resources with the DOJ Elder Justice Network Locator. You can also contact your local area agency on aging or Adult Protective Services or legal aid to inquire about a local network. The Administration for Community Living maintains an elder care locator. Also see the CFPB's online network development guide for guidance and tools to plan and host a convening, establish your network, and expand your network's capabilities. That's at consumerfinance.gov/elder-network. Well, we want to end on time, and I wanted to say thank you to all of our participants for your engagement and for being with us today. We distribute recordings to our webinars, so in the coming days in your inbox, all registrants will get a link to the recording of this webinar, and that same link will give you access to previous webinars in this series. So how to plan an Elder Justice Network convening, who's who in Elder Justice Networks, age-friendly banking, and opportunities for collaboration. If you missed any of those, do go back and view those. Great information, great resources to be aware of. And stay in touch. You can contact the Office for Older Americans at eldernetworks@cfpb.gov, and you can browse a real wealth of resources at consumerfinance.gov/older-Americans. At Ask CFPB, in the second link listed there, that's an archive of answers to a whole plethora of questions, very helpful and detailed information available there. And submitting complaints is available through the CFPB website at consumerfinance.gov/complaint. And there's also an option to submit a complaint via phone at the number listed on the screen. With that, I wanted to thank everyone for being with us for our webinar today, and thank you to our presenters. We wish you a good afternoon, and we will send around the recording link in a couple of days. Thank you.